Yo, 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 welcome back. I'm Shiko.
I'm Yam.
And I'm Gadoni.
And this is
Okay,
Okay.
Kiasi.
Whoa, wow, wow. Last episode of season 4.
Pew, 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 pew.
Wah, 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 wah,
Me,
wah,
me,
wah,
me,
wah.
me.
So exciting, so exciting. How you guys feeling? Kadani, how is your week?
My week was good. It was cool. I had a fun time yesterday hanging out with my friends. We haven't seen each other in a long time, so I was really excited hanging out with them and their babies. I feel like the older you get, the more you have to be like very, what's the word with hanging out? Like you have to be very, what's the word? What's the word?
Social?
No, like
Intentional.
that's the word. Thank you. Oh, dictionary corner coming through. Um, intentional with hang out with friends because like life happens and then it's just like wherever. And then you realize you haven't hung out in like 75 years. So it was really nice hanging out with them and just doing nothing. Today has also been a holiday. I've really enjoyed doing nothing. Let me tell you, that's my theme. Okay, my theme for life currently is doing nothing. I can't wait for the emails to start being let's circle back to next year. I'm just like November is over, December is here. Also, it's like a month to my
Or
birthday.
to live in a society that shuts down in November for Christmas.
It doesn't shut down
Meanwhile, here
in November.
nothing looks different.
It's not going to shut down in November. It'll shut down in like December, second week ish. But it's
But by the last week of November, people are not whatevering.
you're right. But I have an event on the
True.
30th of November, which is the last day. So for me, I'm gonna be working till the last second of November. After that, call offline. You know how when your phone, if you're in a plane, airplane mode, that's the mode I'm going to be on. Okay. Don't call me no more and don't
Hmm.
text me no more. I'm done. And it's a month to my 36th birthday. So wow. Is that 40? Knocking, 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 knocking
Congrats.
on my door. Same chick that you slept with. Anyway, yeah. So my week, I've really digressed. It was cool. Um,
Kadani. Wow.
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
it's exciting. And I'm excited about my event on the 30th because all the speakers I wrote to have all confirmed. I'm just like, I'm going to end the year in a bang. Then I'm going on airplane mode. Yeah, but my week was good.
Okay. That's cool. Shiko, how about you?
Um, I'm doing really well actually. I launched my podcast this week. It is called Meet Me Here. It is
Sorry, Abuse again.
it's
I think
now
we hyped in the midst of your name drop.
uh, Meet Me Here with Shiko Boccaccio. It is
Meet you
available
where?
on
Wow.
Spotify, Google CG What. Meet Me Here.
Wow. So
Yeah.
good.
So that's been a passion project that I've wanted to launch for a really long time. And I felt like it's about done time. Anyway,
In a minute,
she's cancelled.
Amanida.
Yeah, so that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling on cloud 8. Um
Not 9?
Why not 9?
I'm yet to get to 9.
Oh.
Okay.
No, not 9 yet. Not 9 yet. I feel
She
like 8
said,
because I've not completed my task. You know when you just feel like there's something you're supposed to do. That's kind of
mm,
how it's feeling for me. Like
mm.
it's just it feels so good. It's I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's blessed.
It
You
is.
know what I
In
Oh,
mean?
Jesus' name, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
we're
So
blessed in the
that's if
spirit.
you guys want to listen, it's called Meet Me Here, available everywhere. We'll drop an ini on the Instagram.
We
Other
will
than
indeed.
that,
It's
life
also
has
available
been
on YouTube. Where?
pretty
Shori.
weird.
Can you give all the instructions?
Oh yeah, I have a YouTube channel too. I think you can find it under How About Chico or Chico Boccaccio. Um, yeah, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, do all the things,
Gang.
and meet me here. How about that? Yeah. Other than that, life has just been lifing, but I feel optimistic about next year. I've already put in my requests to be taken off the strongest soldier list.
I saw on
So
Amen.
your
hopefully
stories.
God
Amen.
gets my request,
Amen.
and I am on the princess life
Soft
list,
life. Let's
because that's
go.
the only life I want to live right now. I need a soft life. I need a soft life. Nyam, how you doing?
I'm good and bad. I feel like this week has been kind of a mixed bag. Um, so really successful on the work front, but also a few disappointments, broken promises on the work front. It's been really good in terms of hanging out with my friends and celebrating life. And it's also been really sad at the loss of life. Both of our friends from youth days, and then also just like the world, based on like how the world is really god.
Welding.
It's
It's on
like
fire.
overwhelming, crash and burn, I mean, like seeing what's happening in Gaza, I mean, even like DRC, the displacement there, Sudan. I'm just like, oh my god, it's
So
so.
sorry.
Are you okay?
I
Are you
just
okay?
stabbed myself and I'm bleeding.
What?
Oh my god.
With what?
I saw your
This is
face
why I
and I
need to
was
stop.
like, I
Yeah.
mean,
Sorry. I was playing with a stapler.
Ooh.
Anyway.
shame on you, but you
Ah.
deserve it. How can you play with a stapler? And here I was
Anyway,
thinking
the
you were
world
so
is
sad
burning.
about
Shiko
the
is
people
dying.
in
Continue, Nyam.
Gaza. I was like, wow, she's so moved by the DRC people.
She
But
said, let me add
anyway,
to
she's
the
just
world
stapling
burning.
herself.
Girl, I'm so
Anyway,
sorry,
yeah,
Sorry,
man.
so
carry on as I
yeah.
first aid.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been up and down, so it's a mixed bag. But I'm glad. I'm being joyful in the moments that joy come, and putting myself in a situation where I don't feel guilty about it, but also being conscious to be grateful despite it all. Yeah, so that's how I am, and it is therefore time to spin the wheel.
Before we spin the wheel, it's that you talked about our friend that reminded me. It was trippy for me because he was my age. And I feel like a lot of times there are certain things that have happened. Like my friend lost a baby, and I'm like, oh my God, we can bury babies. Then we lost parents. It's just like, oh my God, we can bury parents. But now it's like us guys, you genuinely, life is so short, and like tomorrow is really not promised. And we really be moving around in the world as if like I'll be here when I'm 55 or whatever. And I think that's what gave more weight to the hangout with my friends yesterday. It's just that thing of, first of all, it came up out of nowhere, but it's, if you can hang out with your friend today, hang out with your friend today, because your friend might not be there tomorrow, find things that give you joy, like small things that give you joy. Because again, if you're working a job, and I get it, you don't have choice most of the time working a job that you don't like, but find something. If work is miserable, start painting or whatever your hobby is, so that there's moments of joy even in the madness. Because for real, guys, life is short, man. Life is short, so fuck, life is short. Anyway,
What do you think you need to be doing better of taking advantage of your time here?
I think taking time for myself, I feel like I'm so busy that I get lost in the busy, and I'm not taking in moments or creating moments for myself. The other day, we went for a walk with my friends in like a forest here in Nairobi, and it was just, one of my friends came with his dog, and it was like me, my best friend, and him, and then Oscar was there. And it's just, we didn't walk for long. It was just like 5K. After that, we sat down for lunch. It was a very chill, non-dramatic day, but it was just like,
She said we didn't walk for long and then said 5K in the same sentence.
Imagine. That's how you know your
5K
sister
is not
has changed.
dramatic.
She said it was a loose 5 kilometers. Nothing much.
I feel like if you're walking in the forest, 5K doesn't feel dramatic. I feel like if you're walking on the road, telling me to walk
You
5K, I'm
still have
like,
to
you're
come
telling
back.
me to walk to the supermarket? No. But in the forest, in the jungle, the miry jungle, 5K is like 1 kilometer. forest math, hiking math. But yeah, I think it's finding things that give me joy. Going back to like photography or content creation for me, those things give me joy. It used to make me so happy to upload on YouTube. Guys, I haven't uploaded on YouTube in probably like 2 years. Why? I'm just like, I have the time. It's
Mm.
giving. I think it's also convincing myself that I'm worth the things that I like, you know. So that's what I can do myself.
Interesting.
Great. So,
Spinners.
are
For
you
the
ready
last
for the
time
spin?
this
The last
season,
spin of season 4?
like a
The last
record
spin of season 4. The
spin,
last spin
spin,
as we know it.
spin, me yeah. Spin, 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 me yeah. Spin, 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 me yeah, me yeah, me yeah, me yeah.
Me. Yeah. We landed on screenplay.
Screenplay. What we've been
Njiku,
watching.
what you been watching?
Wow.
You've been watching a housewife or something.
Housewives.
Yeah.
Standard. Standard behavior. I've been watching a Housewives right now. Potomac is back. Um, Married to Med is back. Married to Med is not a housewife, but it's a Bravo, and I
It's
like Married
reality.
to Med. I
Yeah.
don't know if you know who Portia is. She was on Atlanta. Not
Yeah.
Portia. Phaedra. Phaedra was on Atlanta Kitambo, but then she got fired by Andy, and then she got brought back. She's not on Atlanta anymore, but she's on Married to Med, which is cool.
Is she married
I've
to a
been watching
doctor?
Real Housewives of Miami as well. They say she's dating a doctor, but I think they just needed like a character on the show,
Mm, I
Wow.
see.
Okay.
and
She
they
moves
needed
around
to
a
give a
lot. Wasn't
storyline.
she in
These days,
Dubai?
she was in Dubai, but she's apparently dating a Nigerian doctor. I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I feel like Andy is just trying to use her because she's a character and she always brings it. I'm not even gonna lie. She might not be my favorite housewife, but she always brings it and she's good for the franchise. Um, she's a messy person. Other than that, other than the housewives, I've been watching a lot of sports. The NBA this year is just pissing me off. I don't know what is going on. I don't know what happened to the refs this year. They're just giving me like high school ref vibes. Their
Mm.
calls have not been giving. The NBA is doing this whole league where Sidri they're doing a tournament inside a tournament. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who's where in the league. So it's a whole mess. I'm sticking to football this year, American football, because at least I understand what's going on there. So yeah.
That
Wow.
makes one of us.
That's
Yam, have
cool.
you been watching basketball?
I have not started watching the NBA season, but because I was watching the WNBA season, which I mean, it's maybe like 3 weeks to a month that it ended with the Aces defending their title. Yeah, but I haven't. I feel like nowadays, honestly, with the NBA, I'm joining at like playoffs. I also because their timings are so off for me. I'm like, I'm just not as committed to wake up for a regular
Oh
schmegular
yeah.
game. So at the playoffs is when I'm like, okay, now let me invest. Yeah. Other than that, it's just like highlights. I'll watch highlights on YouTube, listen to like Stevie A or something.
What
Interesting.
else are you watching?
Um, I am watching TikTok, and because of TikTok, actually, I saw there was a ruling. There was a there was a ruling about a case against a hospital, and it was like a big payout, like 220 million against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in Florida. And it piqued my interest, just, like reading people's comments and being like they deserved more and, justice for Maya. And so from the comments, I saw that it's actually based on, I mean, it's a real story, but there's a documentary about it. So I went to Netflix and I watched the documentary. It's called Take Care of Maya. It's a really sad story. So I was in my
Even the
feelings
cover is
about
sad.
it.
I can't even.
Yeah. But now, yeah, I was invested now based on the settlement. So that's what I watched. And then the other thing I watched was my sister on YouTube. Her first
Woo, woo,
episode
woo.
of Meet Me Here. Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, so that's what I've been watching. Gadosh?
Myself, in my status as an offline person, airplane mode, what I have been doing is rewatching old things because I don't have time to invest in a new storyline. So there's a thing I got that's like a Disney type, well, not Disney, what do you call it? Netflix, Hulu type thing that has everything. It's like one of those websites that we do not watch movies from, but in an app. So you can basically find everything, and they have Disney. So I watched Moana, I watched Encanto again and didn't talk about Bruno. Then what I did is I entered the John Wick universe and I watched 1 to 4 because John Wick is bae. I mean, also, guys, there's a comedian who was talking about how the first time they watched John Wick 1, they were like, "This is the dumbest storyline ever." Like that, this guy would kill this many people over a dog. And then they were like, "Then I got a dog and I understood." And like for real, even me, we'd have 4 movies if anyone did
Imagine I've
anything.
never seen Encounter. At the Encounter. What's it
Oh,
called?
Encanto.
Encanto. I've never seen John Wick. I've never seen none of that. I don't even know who John
You've
Wick is. I
watched
can pass
Moana.
him in the streets. Is he a guy?
John Wick is a
I've watched
character
Moana
that
once.
Keanu Reeves plays. So I'm just like on rewatch mode. I'm not.
Never experienced it.
Oh, I also watched Matilda the musical
He's the one
again.
from Save the Bell.
Girl, I don't know that she was in Save the Bell. Save the Bell? Like Saved by the Bell, the series.
I don't know. Keanu.
You
Keanu.
guys,
I
please
feel like
don't. You are disappointing me greatly. Um,
it's your
No, I'm trying
generation.
to.
Tell us.
I'm just trying to
hey, my
understand your
God.
sister. How she said saved the bell. I'm just like, what is that? First,
She
let
didn't
us
say
figure
save
it
the bell.
out.
I don't know where you are. No, I think maybe Keanu Reeves is known for Speed. Um,
Say a
I think
movie
The
Shiko would know
Matrix.
if it's.
No,
What?
That's where he's known from, The
yeah,
Matrix.
it's
Keep
unlikely you would
trying.
know him, but it's that you said you would not know him in the streets. I said that's not his real name.
She
Keanu
said, I
or
can
who?
pass John
John.
Wick in the
Yeah,
streets.
she said I will pass John in the streets. I said
Hey, girl.
okay.
Yeah, John Wick is not
Oh,
a real
okay.
guy.
Anyway, that was fun.
I feel like I would kind of know who Keanu is, I think. Didn't he do Disney? Anyway.
Sure.
Wow.
He played Mickey Mouse
That's literally like
in
asking
Mickey
if
Mouse
Tom
Club.
Cruise did Disney, just so you know.
No, but I feel like Keanu did Disney.
I have to Google this. I'm like,
Are
what
you
did he
Eh,
do?
Googling?
Yeah, I have
yes,
to
of course
check.
I am.
Keanu.
No, girl.
By the way, if you don't know him in The Matrix, there's nothing you
No.
will know here. You being knowing you and
Yeah,
how you
actually,
are.
you're right.
Okay, anyway, I don't know who Keanu Reeves
If you don't know The
is.
Matrix, there's no
I
other
don't know
one we
who
can
John
tell
Wick
you.
is. And apparently, Keanu and John are the same person.
Indeed, they are.
Yeah. In this episode, we're going to be talking about parental relationships, and some things might be triggering to you if you may be struggling with a parental relationship. So just a heads up while we go into it. We just always want to be sensitive and give y'all a heads up on what to expect. Yeah.
Yes.
Hiya. Hope you enjoy it.
Enjoy.
Okay, y'all, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a special guest, our second guest of the season,
Bow,
but
bow.
one that is very close to our hearts. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our stepfather, Mr. Sekou Rubadiri. Wee, wee, wee.
Sha-ta-ta-ta-ta.
Oh,
Meow, meow, meow.
Fireworks,
Breaking
fireworks,
glass.
pew,
Rubadira.
pew,
Me, me,
pew.
me, me.
thank you.
DJ Sekou. You like your
Craziness
introduction?
galore. Yeah, I loved it. Craziness galore, which I expect.
You should be used to it by now.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So when we were thinking about having an episode on forgiveness, your name came up, because we just think that you have a very interesting story, specifically when it comes to your relationship with your father and your approach to forgiveness, as you've had to, of course, deal with it over and over and over in your life, as everyone does. So
Uh-huh.
I'd love to start off by learning a little bit more, or introducing our audience to a little bit about how you grew up. Like, what was your experience with your father? Like, did you grow up just the two of you in the house? Do you have siblings? Are you what do they call it? Domestic family, single parent, nuclear?
Not domestic.
It's a domestic
What
family.
a farm time. We are on a farm. Domestic animals,
Are you
domestic
old
family.
McDonald?
Yeah.
No, I would venture to classify my upbringing as in an abnormally normal family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, one, we moved around a lot in my youth. I was born in Malawi, but at a very tender age of 3, moved to the UK, and then 2 years later moved back to Malawi. 6 months into that, moved to the US. Was in the US for several years. Moved from there to Uganda, then Kenya, back to the US, and now back to Kenya. So moved
Wow.
around a lot,
Mr.
and so
Worldwide.
Yeah,
that
Mr. Worldwide for sure.
Jet setter, go
that
getter.
wow, okay. And that, I think, set most of the climate, the environment that I grew up in, set it up. And I guess being in that framework, with dad doing what he did, being a university professor, and then being an ambassador, and then being a professor again, and doing the education thing, and my mom being in education, a lot of in and out, a lot of people staying with us at weird times of the year, finding ourselves. I come from a family of um, total, it's 10 kids, and it's a blended family, and so finding myself, um, because of the movement, because of the space, or the occupations that my parents had, a lot of people coming in and out of the house. And so there were times when we would just on the spur of a moment hear, oh, move into the next room, go sleep in your, share a bed with your brother, because we have people staying over. And sometimes it was for a night or two. Sometimes it ended up being weeks, and occasionally months, and just finding yourself displaced. But yeah, as far as my relationship with my father, because of the blended family situation, for me, it was a time of confusion. I think I was young, but young enough and old enough in that space to know that, there was something a little bit weird, if I can use that word. And just discovering that as a parent, he wasn't as accessible as I would have liked. Being a boy, and looking up to your father, looking for direction in growing into manhood, there was that absence. And a lot of it I attributed, like I said, to his profession, and just the having to be around the university, having to travel the world himself, in different capacities, um, and then at the same time discovering that part of that time was actually taken up with my stepmother. And so until I got older, um, and trying to figure out what was bothering me, and what eventually started to anger me, um, to get me to the point where I needed to address things, was very convoluted. And so that's why I refer to it as an abnormally normal upbringing.
Wow.
Interesting.
I think you've kind of mentioned some of the things that you remember being like significant in terms of your relationship with him. But are there like specific memories, even as you were growing up, aside from him traveling a lot, that you think had an impact on you in that sense as you were growing up? Maybe it's like things he said to you about, I don't know, being a man, or, are there specific things as you were growing up that you could like point to that had an impact in your relationship?
Oh yeah. I think, and it's not unique to me. I know growing up, I have run into, and I know I will continue to run into men who have had issues with their fathers. Initially, in the space that I was, thinking it was very unique. Um, it was painful. I remember one particular instance that kind of drove me or started to drive the fire in me. I was uh, maybe one would consider a playful guy in school. Academics was not at the top of the list. It was more around sports. I loved sports, and I would pick up sports very quickly. I was very good at whatever I attempted to do, except for soccer, and that was only because I was small size wise, and so I used to get pushed around on the pitch. And so I opted for individual sports where I had control of my space: swimming, table tennis, and don't ever call it ping pong. That's an insult. But academic side was lacking. It wasn't like I was bad, but I just didn't put a whole lot of effort into it. And then when I got to Form 4 doing my O levels, I remember there was this big exam that we're supposed to be doing, and I figured I'll be ready for it. And there's always this mock exam that they give you halfway through the year to just kind of gauge where you are. And I remember out of
And you
nine
never know. You
subjects,
never know where you are. Let me just
oh,
be honest.
absolutely.
I feel
You
like
never
people
know.
always feel mocks. It's the
Marks,
worst thing in the
you're like,
world. They're
wow,
the
have I even
worst.
been in this class? Where was
I mean, the
I?
trick is in the name.
they're,
It
they're
mocks
mocking you.
you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Sorry, Sekou.
No worries. So out of nine subjects, I think I got seven Fs and a B and a C. And the day that the results came in, I was at a friend's place down the road, playing, doing some sports. And I remember my older brother coming in and knocking on the door and saying, "You need to come home. Dad is looking for you." And so I went home, and I'm thinking, what did I do? I mean, that bad that he would call me away from all of this. And when I walked in the house, he just shoved the piece of paper in my face, and then just looked at me. And I'm looking at these things, and I'm thinking, oh wow, I guess F doesn't stand for fair, in in most capacities. But he turned to my older brother and said, "Do something about this boy, otherwise we're going to have a failure on our hands." And
Mm.
that never left me. I mean, even when I got older, I think I found myself trying to prove everything I was doing was trying to prove, that that I was not. And so that built into that whole process of when it came to figuring out what I was dealing with versus what was being thrown at me and where forgiveness was needed. Things like that, an instance like that would leave a mark. And in the one sense, push in certain areas that, especially, I think he didn't want me to go into or didn't care for. And so when I dabbled in the music space, I really committed myself to all of that because I knew that that was not something that he necessarily wanted me to go into long term. Yes, there was the encouragement, and he played trumpet when he was in school, so he had a trumpet when I picked it up. He was encouraging a little bit in that way, He went to a business trip in Spain, came back with a Spanish guitar, which he never could play. But I picked it up and started to get into that space. So there was a little bit of encouragement, but not too much. And so it was those areas where I felt he didn't want me to go into. That's where I'm going to push and show that I can do it. Yeah, there was just the push and pull, the regular son father thing that you go through when you're growing up. As you get into the teen space, you start trying to test the waters, see how far you can push them, and you want to show that you're a man, and so you test him as well. And of course, he being the the uh, the lion in the house is not going to let you get too far. It's like when you get to this point, I'll throw you out, or show you who's boss, kind of a thing. um, but I think the relationship was it wasn't necessarily bad, but it was not smooth. um, all my brothers, and I have four brothers, went to some kind of boarding school, and I was the only one who didn't, because the secondary school that I went to was 5 minutes away from our house. So it didn't make sense for me to necessarily be a boarder and pay that, because it was on the university campus. And so, I would wait until 5 minutes before the bell and then run to class just to get there on time. 90% of the time I got there on time. A couple of times I didn't, and got sent to the principal's office to get my share of caning. Um, I wasn't a bad kid, but I think I found myself in the principal's office more often than was necessary.
Mm.
And that may have also been
Yeah.
a factor that, although he was not necessarily the disciplinarian in the house, my mother was more of the disciplinarian, I think because she was around. But it was only when it came to really hard things that he would even know, or maybe even care.
Mm.
So, yeah, a bunch of things that, I would venture to say contributed to the rocky road that we went through. Some of it is conventional, it's normal, being a teenager, being a male teenager, and just being in that space and finding your way. But like I said, some of the other factors that I mentioned earlier I would definitely say played into the relationship.
When did you realize? Is there a moment that you felt like you needed to like forgive your father? Because I know he influenced a lot of what your behavior was, your
Hmm.
values and everything. But is there a
Hmm.
specific moment that you thought, oh, I feel like I need to forgive him? And what is it that prompted that realization?
Yeah, I think I can nail down a specific situation. Let me just throw in a disclaimer there, or a preamble. One of the things that I struggled with, and it was with both parents, I think, was the fact that I have an older brother, and he is almost a year and a half older than me. And then the brother who comes after me is almost 3 years younger than me. And so growing up, I was in
Mm-hmm.
this limbo space because, being a firstborn male, and especially in an African setting, there's the pride that comes with that. And so there's the attention that he gets, and, pushing and driving and guiding and all of those things. And he went to the best secondary school there was, and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to tag along there. And at some point, I remember being told, leave your older brother alone. He's finding his way, he's got his own friends. You're too young to be hanging around with him. So just give him his space. So
Mm-hmm.
I turn to connect with my younger brothers, and them being 3 and 4 years younger than me, I'm told you're too old to be hanging around with your younger brothers. So, leave them alone. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
well, where do I stand in all of this? And
Mm-hmm.
kind of finding myself in that, like I said, that limbo space. And so that got me thinking a lot. It got me reflecting a lot. I didn't mention that my parents were both freedom fighters in the quest for independence from Malawi. Way back, the Brits ran the place for the longest time. And when this was the year early 1959, my parents were arrested by the Brits and jailed. My dad was in a prison in Malawi. My mother was sent to a prison in Zambia. And while she
Wow.
was there, after she had been picked up, she discovered she was pregnant with me. So I spent the first
Wow.
several months of gestation in
In
this prison
prison.
space. Uh, and,
This
Dang,
you know, and when
explains
I,
so much.
sorry,
you've been to
Yum said
jail.
I
it.
said this explains so much.
I'm locked up, won't let
They
Don't
me
let
won't
out.
me
let
out.
me out.
Whoa.
so, so when she was about, I think, 7 months pregnant, she was actually trying to keep the pregnancy away from the authorities. And this I found out just the other day, in my late 50s, 60s. And her
Mm,
friends were saying, no, you need to let them know so that they can, make some changes here and there. But she was this feisty woman who wanted to hang with the other ladies and be in, camaraderie with the other ladies. And so she was eating what they were eating. She was going through what they were going through. And then eventually they discovered she was pregnant, and they were like, no, goodness gracious me, what are we going to do? So they released her and put her under house arrest back in Malawi. And so I was born at home. Um, but I think back, and I'm a very poor eater, and I've always been most of my life. And I think back to what I went through and what I was eating as a fetus, and just that whole experience. And so there's that reflection on that, where from my parents' standpoint, I I felt a little bit of a disconnect with dad right from the beginning, because when I was born, he wasn't there. He didn't see me until several
mm,
months much later. And I
mm,
remember one of my aunties or somebody close to the family saying, and this was when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. They came by the house, and meeting us after many years of not seeing us, she said to my mother, "Oh my goodness, is this Sekou?" And my mom says, "Yeah, you remember he was born, after I was released from things." She says, "Yes, I remember. I was there at the time." And she says, "This is the same young man." And my mom said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Why are you so surprised?" And she says, um, I'm just I'm marveling at how good he looks. She thought I was a decent or good looking young man at that point. And she says, "When remember when he was born, I came in and you were telling me that you have this new son, and I looked in the bassinet, and my first question to you was, where did you get that?" And I'm sitting here listening.
Not that.
Aunties.
not an
Aunties being
I
argument.
consistent.
swear.
Oh,
And
aunties.
I'm
Gosh.
listening. I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, she said what? And apparently, when my dad came home, he had the same reaction. It was like, "Oh my goodness, where did you get
No.
that?" So, you know, dealing with that as you grow up, and just thinking, uh, okay, so I wasn't responsible for any of that. I didn't have any control over that, but yet
Mm,
it's
Yeah.
being fed into you from some
mm,
some of it from a little insensitivity, some from just ignorance, but
Mm.
that feeds into your psyche. It feeds
Yeah.
into your space. And so growing up, you're hearing these things, and you're wondering about yourself, and so there's that element to try and prove yourself. So going back to what you were saying, Donnie, I think the moment that that came was the fact that, because of the blended family and how dad spent a lot of time with my stepmother and the other side of the family, we as kids were close. We were really close knit. Um, but I think I was old enough to understand that there was somebody else in the picture. And there was a divide, there was a gap, and I saw what it was doing to my mother. I saw how she was treated from time to time, and it just built this animosity, this anger, this resentment. And so when I
Mm.
left to go back to the States, I was on my own. I went to do my college, and leaving behind this space that one, I was almost happy to get away from, but at the same time, knowing that I was going to be disconnected from my immediate siblings as much as my half siblings. And even though we never thought of each other as such, we were just brothers and sisters. I was leaving my mom and, finding my way. And then as I found my way on my own, started to look back and go, I need to do something. I need to protect my mom. Um, and so realizing that this resentment, this anger was in me, and as an introvert, not being able to or not being encouraged to speak out and share. Part of that was cultural, but at the same time, it was also based on personality and not wanting to present yourself as a problem right from the beginning when you're trying to start a life in a totally new country, a totally new space. Um, I realized that I needed to look in the mirror and start dealing with me. And so for the first time, I thought, I'm I'm carrying this, and it's a burden within me. I need to release it. Um, and so I was away from home for 10 years before I went back the first time. So I didn't see any of my family members for 10 years. And you have to remember, back in the day, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have all the technology. So it was snail mail. You're waiting for a letter. You write a letter, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get home. And then you're waiting another 2, 3 weeks to get a response. And
Mm.
so it was 10 years before I really had a connection with my folks. There were a couple of phone calls in between that I was able to make, but they were very expensive, so they didn't come easy. So when I came back after 10 years, my parents had moved from Nairobi to Habaroni, Botswana. So I came to Nairobi first because this was basically home for me. But I came here and then I spent 2 weeks reconnecting with friends and family. And then I went down to Botswana to reconnect with my parents down there. So I go to Botswana and we're able to spend a little more time together and try to connect. And he took me out to have a drink, have the guys sit down and connect and bond. And I remember going into this bar with him. Before I left, I hadn't been a drinker, but coming back, I had started to drink at least a little bit, the wine thing and so forth. So he
America ruined
takes
you.
he orders a beer. He asks me what I want, and I got a glass of wine, and so I'm thinking this is our moment to kind of reconnect, to bond, and we just sit there and look at each other for a good 45 minutes. I think the only thing that was said was, "So, how are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing well. You got yourself settled in the U.S.?" And I'm like, "Mm-hmm." And he's like, "So, what are you doing at this point?" And at that point, I had started working, so I was managing some car rental locations. I was a district manager for budget. And I said, "No, I'm working as a manager, for a car rental place." He goes, "You're a manager in the U.S.?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You must be making more money than I am." And that was the extent of the conversation that we had.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I then, spent a little more time connecting with my mom. My mom was uh, just the sweetest woman. And during my time of bonding with her, I discovered that, the same pattern that I had left in Kenya was seemingly still happening, and there was a disconnect. And so that started to rile up the emotion in me again. And then I left, but before I left, I said to Mom, I think you need to just get away for a little bit. And I invited her to come to LA. I said, I'll pay for you to come out and just spend some time to just breathe, just to get away and breathe. And she said she'd love to do that. So I arranged that. My sister, her only daughter, said she wanted to come along as well. So I arranged for them to come, and they came out, and we had a really good time in LA. And just that whole, um, again, reconnecting and bonding and talking about some of the hard things that we were dealing with. And I remember in one conversation, I said to my mother at that point, I'm really going to confront my father about this whole thing. And my mother said, no, I don't want you to talk to him. I don't want you to confront him. And my sister immediately said, no, if Sekou wants to do it, let him. Let him deal with what he needs to, get it out, because some of us have been dealing with the same thing and we're all afraid or fearful to address it. So if he has found that strength or that space, let him do it. And I said, Mom, why wouldn't you want me to do it? And she said, because you live here and I'm going back there. And I'm the one who's going to have to deal with the repercussions.
Mm.
And I thought about that for a moment, and I thought, okay, I understand what she's saying, what she's feeling. So how do I deal with what I need to deal with and getting it off my chest? And at the same time accommodating her, which I
Mm.
think at that point I deemed more important, was just not leaving her open, as it were. So after thinking about it for a long time, I decided to write a letter and just be open and honest. And in that letter, I wrote and explained exactly where my anger was coming from, situations that, and very specifically, situations around the lack of his attention and bonding with us as we were growing up, my stepmother, and um, and I said, I'm telling you all of this because I need to get it out of my system. It's killing me. It's causing me to shut down, and I need to get beyond that. And the only way that I know to do that is to tell you exactly how I'm feeling. But even as I do, and letting you know how angry I am going to ask for your forgiveness, because I have also had behavior, and even if it hasn't been overt, within me, I have carried a hatred that toward you that I need to ask forgiveness for. So
Mm.
I'm going to ask for your forgiveness, even as I explain what I'm going through and wanting you to address that. At that point, I didn't know if I would get a response, and whether he would ask for my forgiveness and the whole thing. But it was more about the fact that in that moment I realized I'm responsible for me. I'm not responsible for him. And so I'm going to do my part, and I'm also going to release the specifics and where my anger was channeled, knowing that within me I hadn't been um, honest. I hadn't been truthful about my feelings, and that hatred toward, the man who gave me life, along with the woman who bore me and birthed me. The only way that I would get that connection would be to start by looking inside me. And so I sent the letter off, and I got no response. And later on, in just kind of feeling through this thing, um, I had a chance to talk to either my sister or my mother, who said, he received that letter and apparently read it, took some time to reflect on it, and then exploded and said, who the hell is he to ask, to tell me all these things, and
Mm.
um, uh,
Well,
put me in this space, uh, seeking me to ask for forgiveness, that kind of a thing.
Mm.
And I was
mhm.
like, oh, so that was the reaction. And they said, yeah, that was the reaction. I was like, okay, great. Well, at least I'm healing. I've let things go. It's definitely a journey. But part of the real opening came when, as you know, I was married before. You have a sister uh, who is, in this case, your stepsister, and
Hey girl,
has
the
been part of
Hey.
audience knows.
They know. Hey
Shout out,
girl,
has
hey
how you
boo.
doing?
has has been in this space with you, and I love all four of you to death. Um, but when I was getting married to her mother, um, we had a reception in LA, and funnily enough, as we were going through this reception, my parents had come for that occasion, doing our thing, and my dad had given his speech earlier. And as I was walking past at one point, he grabbed me by the arm and he goes, "Come with me, just sit with me for a moment." And I was like, okay. I went and sat with him, and I was like, "What's going on?" There was a bit of that tension and that space thing, and I'm thinking, dude, I'm married now, and I'm a man, so don't try to pick a fight with me. I'm
I'm
in this. I'm in
grown.
this. I'm
Let him
I'm
talk.
a grown man, okay?
Hey.
And he sits me down and he says, out of the blue, he just says, "Thank you for forgiving me." And I'm like, "What?" He says, "Thank you for forgiving me. You sent me a letter and you said you forgive me for whatever. Thank you for forgiving me." I was so blown away. I was speechless. I didn't know how
How
to
many
respond
years?
to it. This was 2 years later that I'm hearing this, and I was just speechless. And I said, "Well, great. I'm glad you feel that way." And that was about all I could say. And that was the end of the story there. But it's been a journey that whole time, getting to the space that I realized I needed to start by looking inward, and then feeling at the same time that I'm going to forgive him regardless of what his reaction may be or how he'll take it. But I'm also going to ask for forgiveness for what was my part in perpetuating some of the interaction and some of the environment that we went through. Um, in as much as I was the child and he's the adult, there was just that space of realizing that if I'm going to get through this, I need to take ownership and, in some sense, control of my space. And regardless of what he does, I'm going to move forward. So when I
Mm.
think of forgiveness, I think of a journey, and I think of how people approach it a lot of the time. And it is a journey, because even after that, there were moments where things would be triggered and they would come back, and I would feel the anger. I would feel the particular space and the emotion that I was in. And
Mm.
have to think back and go, okay, it's okay. Remember what you did, and remember the steps that you took. Remember the commitment that you made to yourself, and the commitment that you made to your father, the commitment that you made to the process. Funnily enough, in the journey, I also discovered that I was angry with my mother. And I was angry at her, and I was trying to figure out, why was I angry? I mean, this was a woman who had gone through so much, a woman that I was very close to and tight with. Why am I angry with her? And I'm feeling these emotions. And I realized I was angry with her for not standing up for herself, and for
Mm.
Mm.
not, you know, being this shield for us as well. It's almost like, If I had seen you standing up for yourself, I probably would have done more in the moment.
Mm.
I was too young to necessarily be that way, but I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, I need to forgive her too, because as I've started to hear her story more and
Mm.
understand why she did what she did, which was mostly for us, that it wasn't that she was scared or was not a strong enough woman to stand up for herself. She had all these other factors she was thinking of, how it would affect her children, how it would affect relationships that had been built there and so forth. So she was carrying so much.
Mm.
And in dealing with all of that, it wasn't until late in life when they retired and my dad started to get dementia that I realized that she carried a lot of love for this man, but she was also carrying a lot of hurt, which she was holding in, protecting others from.
Mm.
And it wasn't until after he passed away that she started to unload and just kind of exhale. And
Mm.
I had a conversation with her, and I even mentioned it to her. I said, Mom, there was a point where I was so ticked off at you. I was pissed off with you for not. I see you standing up. You were the firebrand head of this women's thing when independence was happening. When we were out of the country as refugees, you were the one that held us up. You provided when you know things were not working as well for
She was
dad,
not a
kind of a thing.
pushover.
She wasn't a pushover, no.
Yeah.
And yet I
A
didn't
boss
see
babe,
you
for
standing
sure.
up for us. I didn't see that.
Mm.
It was more of an internal thing, and she expressed it in other ways which I didn't see.
Mm.
But I caught myself thinking, why the hell didn't you just stand up?
Mm.
And then understanding why she didn't, I realized I needed to forgive her and release the anger that I had built up. This was many years later.
Mhm.
I'm a grown man with a family, having gone through a divorce myself, um, and at this point realizing that there was still things that I needed to deal with within myself.
Do you think
Wow.
how did that improve your relationship with your parents in their later years? Like that realization, like was it just like a continual, like after the letter and the forgiveness and like everything your mom told you, what do you feel like there was like a release, or was it a continual like still processing, still figuring sorry, my throat is whatever, still figuring out our way, or like how do you think that forgiveness or release affected your relationship with your parents in their later years?
There was That's a great question. There was definitely the immediate release and the exhaling, and at least realizing, okay, where do we go from here? And then understanding that that is just a moment, and the next steps are going to be a journey, reinforced by the fact that those triggers would happen along the way, and you're reminded that this is a journey. What happened back then and that moment was that moment, but the journey continues. And in many instances, um, I had to remind myself and remember that uh, these guys are human. And especially looking at my dad, I had to remember, you know what? He's human. We all make mistakes. I made some, mistakes in my life. I mean, a lot of them. Knowing in secondary school how many times I got caned should have been an indication of of mistakes that I'd made. But even in
Go
later in
second
life, as you grow
bonds.
later in life, realizing we all make mistakes, and some of them are inadvertent, others are very intentional, and we pay the consequences for those. And so as I grew older and started looking at my dad, I'm like, okay, he's not that superhuman that I thought he was. You know how you think your dad is being Superman and mom is Superwoman, and you put him on a pedestal and realize that even on that pedestal, as much as you give them a lot of respect and a lot of love, you realize that they are human and they do make mistakes. So in terms of the relationship, unfortunately, when it got to the space that, so after the 10 years, I've come back to the States, and we go through the 2-year point where he says, thank you for forgiving me. Then I'm gone away again from the continent here for another 10 years before I come back again. So there's a disconnect. And around that time, as things start to unravel, my dad had been reappointed to the ambassadorship for Malawi to the UN. So they came to New York during that time, and I was able to visit a couple of times. But those were just, spot visits and so forth. There was really no time to reconnect. And then after the 5-year term that he had, they moved back to the continent, and I didn't come back here until 2002. So you have that whole space. Now he's gone back and they're working at the University of Malawi, doing their thing. So a couple of spot visits and then they retire. And just before he started to get into that retirement space, the dementia started hitting and creeping in. So he was slowly going into this abyss. And by the time I came and moved back to Kenya, which was 2007, late 2007, and then started to do more regular visits down to Malawi, I couldn't connect with him because he was not all there. So
Mm,
when you talk about most of my life, it was rocky, and then it was gone. There was this space,
Mm,
and then there's the person in front of you, but they're not all there.
mm,
So
mm,
with my mom, it had always been, pretty tight, pretty smooth, but there were also disconnects here and there. When technology kicked in, she was never a WhatsApp kind of person unless there was a young person around there that could help her navigate that.
mm.
But we were always in touch one way or another. She was very consistent in calling all of us regularly. With her, it was a more fluid, a more continuous relationship. But like I said, with dad, it got to that point where dementia really kicked in, and there was no connection.
I'm curious about something. Because you're talking about one, the child parent relationship, but also I think we talked about languages of apology and all of that before. But it's like, how do I forgive when you haven't asked for it? Where it's just like,
Mm.
in as much as I understand what you're saying and I hear it logically, do you ever have, like, with the triggers and everything, is there a time where it's just like you never said you're sorry? Because, like, he got the letter and he's like, who do you think you are? And then you
Mhm.
come and tell me thank you, and it's just like, but I know this wasn't the thing. Do you ever have a moment where you're just like, and how do you deal with those moments?
And a very interesting question. I hear it, and I'm going to use one of my father's famous lines. Allow me to bring you a little closer to your question.
Wow.
You got red.
Thanks. I'm just like, what? How are you bringing me to my question? I don't want.
I know I love to use that line. No, your question was very crystal clear. He just happened to use that when he was being interviewed by some newspaper reporter who was asking a question, and it took him 3 minutes to ask the question. And my father finally said to him, just allow me to bring you a little closer to your question. yes, there are moments. There have been moments, definitely, being human, where um, I it wasn't like a blow up, but it would be a reflection and go, what was that about, and what do I do with that? But having been raised in the church, I look at it this way. When you think about the story of forgiveness in the Bible, and whether you believe it or not, just follow the context. God sent his son, and his son was the sacrifice so that there would be reconciliation between God and man. And
Mm,
God was the one who reached out first, using his son to do that. And so my reflection on that has been, for reconciliation to happen, and it doesn't always happen the way that you think it should, there is some
mm,
relativity in that space. It's incumbent on me to step into that space of giving the forgiveness first, even if it is not asked for, to release me. And hopefully it will release the other person. And maybe they will come back and say, thank you for forgiving me. I should have asked for forgiveness. If they felt that they were in the wrong, maybe they don't. And that's where the relativity comes. Because for them, they may be in that space where they're like, no, I didn't think that I needed forgiveness. I didn't think that
mm,
I did anything wrong. So I look at it like, in the journey that we're going through, forgiveness is about reconciliation, me reconciling with the individual. But that's only if the individual wants to be reconciled with. They may not. And the instance that, or the situation that brought that about, may be such that I don't get reconciliation and people are just going to move on. But in the space that I am, I'm going to release myself in as much as I'm releasing the individual to move on and not stay captive to what they did, which gives them power, even if they sit in the space of, I didn't do anything wrong. By allowing them to sit in that place, on that seat of power, I'm held captive. So I look at it like, I'm not going to take responsibility for what you do or how you react. Whether you feel you need the forgiveness or not, whether you feel you've done something wrong or not, that's up to you. Ultimately, I'm going to share with you what I feel and what I've gone through and how I feel you may have been wrong. And in some cases, you were absolutely wrong. Whether you
mm,
see it that way or not will then eventually be up to you. But I am going to step out of this and I'm going to start living. I'm going to start breathing and exhaling in my life without the
mm,
cloud, without the power held over me, so that when those triggers come, I can
mm,
handle them a lot better, a lot quicker, because, for lack of a better expression, I'm in control. I haven't given
mm,
my pen away to somebody else to write the story in that moment.
mm,
How much do you think culture plays a part in all of this? I feel like culturally, mm, there's very few families, I feel like, in African cultures that have that really close bond that I've seen, like parent-child relationship. I mean, right now you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing it way more and more, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how do you think culturally that plays a role?
You make a good point in that more recently there has been a lot more openness. Culture
Yeah.
definitely plays a whole lot into that, because my his reaction to my letter was both personal and cultural. It's like, how the heck does this child of mine write me a letter like this? And how the heck does he write this letter knowing that I am the elder, I'm the adult, I'm the parent? And from a very cultural standpoint, I think it was driven by a lot of that. And me having lived a good portion of my life, more than half of my life, close to maybe 3/4 of my life in away and in the West, definitely played a lot into how more open I became, and how more um, free I was to address many of those things. The first couple of times I came home, I found myself dealing with situations the way I would in the US, where if somebody is out of line, I would point it out right then and there to their face and deal
Mm.
with it. And the reaction would be one of shock. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, because in Africa we have to beat around the bush like for 3 months first.
yeah.
If even you beat
And
the bush.
that would naturally be part of my personality. Being the introvert, I tend to try to soften the blow when
Mm.
I'm confronting, um, give the person a bit of their dignity, even when I shouldn't, quote unquote. But culturally, I think that would play a lot into it. I still run into people who say to me, how do you talk to people like that, here? And I'm like, what do you mean? I just said something. I just expressed myself. I was not rude. I just was firm or assertive about what I was addressing. And
Mm.
culturally, a lot of people cannot handle that, or they think it might be inappropriate. But I think more and more, as the world has become a smaller village, people have been exposed more. There is a lot more of that coming into the culture here, and people are learning to express themselves. People are learning to receive the assertiveness, not so much as rudeness, but just as somebody standing up for themselves.
Yeah. So I guess knowing what you know now, um, after living this whole life, the whole journey, like talking about how, you've lived through the triggers, you've lived through the different experiences. Do you think that there would be a difference in how you approached your forgiveness, and even the relationship with your dad? I mean, in looking back in hindsight, is there anything you'd have done differently?
In hindsight, if I had known, I think I might have approached it sooner. I do miss might not be the word, because when you miss something, it means that you've had it before, technically. There's that space where I look back and think I lost out because I didn't have some of those father son moments,
Mm.
where you navigate life in terms of uh, being a man and wanting someone as close as your father to kind of help you navigate in terms of having the conversations, talking through things, even if he's not telling you what to do. um, I never had that, and even in my adolescence and my early 20s and so forth, being out there on my own, my connection with other men was never tight. I didn't hang out with the boys. um, I forged my own way, and a lot of it was on my own. Um,
Mm.
a lot of it was also isolated. So um, that sense of looking back and saying I would have loved to go through that moment of having that first drink with dad. Back then, even though most first drinks you're having with your buddies and so forth, but there comes a time when that connection happens. Having those down to earth conversations um, about life, about what you want to do, about women, about how to navigate the world of femininity, how to um, navigate the world of children. Being able to ask him about
Mm.
how he handled being a parent, being a father, and getting some
Mm.
insights, in that respect. Later in life, especially after he passed, and there were very many tributes, very many memorials for him because of who he was, all over the place, in Malawi, in Kenya, in Uganda. We heard of a few others in places that we didn't even know just because of his accomplishments. And hearing people talk about how the many times they sat down with him, it was just an amazing, eye-opening, experience, um, life-changing, and they would never, forget. And I'm
Mm,
thinking, where was that moment for me?
mm,
Mm.
Dang.
And hearing, all these things happening, you're like, was I the son or were you the son?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a thing. And these are people
yeah.
who, you don't even know. And I know most of my siblings kind of went through the same experience, or a little bit of that experience to a degree. And thinking to myself, I don't want my kids to get to this space where they feel like, where were those moments for me? Where were those moments for me? And so you guys came into my life at a much later stage. I mean, I think Shiko was maybe 11 at the time. Um,
Sounds about right if you say so.
Correct.
but
We're just like,
so
yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
Yes, I
so
was
I
21. I know.
I deliberately, with Rachel, I deliberately made the choice, very intentional choice from the early age to ensure that I was having those conversations in as much as she was understanding what she could at the time, looking at me like, dude, what are you talking about? Um, but having those connections, even after her mother and I divorced and we were living in separate houses, I was constantly and very intentionally reaching out to ensure that I think what I didn't have, I would give.
Mm.
And, hopefully that happened, in my space. Um, I made that attempt. And even with Chico, we had our conversations every once in a while, and I would deliberately, reach out. Um, as a teenager, there was that teenage space that she was in. And of course, there are those moments where I'm like, okay, she's not getting it. But it's okay because I was thinking again, it's me who is the adult. I need to make the effort. And regardless of how it is received, that's my responsibility. I need to be the one to make
Mm.
that effort. And then as I got to know you guys, Kadoni and Yam, hopefully you've experienced a little bit of that. You were, um, adults, as it were, when we connected, and so there's that also that space of understanding that um, you're at a point where you make your choices, and if you choose to reach out to me and ask for advice or whatever, I will gladly give it, but understanding that you're also um, in your spaces, and I need to respect that. Um, um, just under the circumstances.
Yeah. And we'll all reach out to you for the cars because when it's making a weird noise, I'm always like, Sekou. But
And
I wanted,
I have no problem with that.
it's the best thing. I'm just like, the car, it's doing a thing. And I know you're always just like, you need to wash your engine. I'll wash it next week. But in this situation and any other relationship, even outside of this, do you think that forgiveness has to end in reconciliation? Like, do you feel like that moment where you're told, thank you for forgiving me, do you think that has to be the result?
No. And as I alluded to earlier, I think forgiveness is relative. Reconciliation also is relative because, like I said, there are some people who feel within themselves that they haven't wronged and that you have to deal with the issue. And so if you keep coming at them like, okay, I've forgiven you. Let's get into this space. They may be in the space where they're like, dude, I didn't need your forgiveness. I didn't do anything wrong. So that connection is not going to happen. I think philosophically, but also practically, going back to the analogy I gave of the creator and that process, Forgiveness was intended to reconcile, to bring around reconciliation. That was the primary intention. Does it happen? No. Because when you think about it, there are people, who don't recognize the sacrifice that God made and therefore don't feel that they need that reconciliation. And in human terms, there are going to be people who will look and say, I don't want that reconciliation with you. Okay. Whether they feel like they did something wrong or not, and they may feel like, yes, you did something and I did something. Let's just leave it as is and just move our own way. That's fine. What I feel is address yourself, look in the mirror, and figure out what you need to do for you. Because if you're carrying the anger and the hurt and the bitterness, like they say, that's like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. There's the healing that needs to happen within you. And part of that is by looking inward first, looking in the mirror and saying, what part did I have to play in all of this? And even if you didn't have a part to play, even if it was a misunderstanding from the other person's point of view and all the blame is coming at you, looking in the mirror gives you a chance to say, okay, I'm going to deal with it from this perspective and I'm going to move on with my life. And if moving on brings about reconciliation with this other person, well and good. The manner and the depth to which that reconciliation goes becomes the choice that you both make, because it could be a surface thing. That reconciliation could be a very surface level thing. Will the relationship ever be the same? I don't think it can be the same. It's either going to be deeper or it's going to be shallower, but you're not going to get it to the same place that it is. And those are the choices that you make. You say, I choose to trust, but I'm going to be smart about the trust. Um, there's the another analogy where we talk about smart trust. We have the propensity to trust. We say to ourselves, I'm going to extend trust to this person, but I'm also going to use my analysis. I'm going to see what their behavior is like, what they've done, what they've changed, how they are acting, and give that trust appropriately based on my propensity to trust and the analysis that I do. And so the reconciliation may be slight, it may be very deep, or it may be non existent.
So, with all that being said, what advice would you give to people trying to reconcile or in a place of limbo with those parental relationships where the other party maybe um is trying to reach out and wants a relationship, or maybe the other party is not, because it's like it goes both ways, like people who are having those tiffs or that struggle in the parental relationship. What advice would you give them?
My first piece of advice would be it starts within. So look in the mirror,
Mm.
either party, if you choose to. There has to be a choice, there has to be intentionality, but it starts with the individual. What part did I play? What am I responsible for? What do I need to address? And then, especially in the case where you had no responsibility and no fault in what happened, and it is by and large all on the other person, but you are making the choice to reach out and to forgive, remember it's going to be a journey. Remember that it may take, quote unquote, multiple points of forgiveness. Going back to, how the disciples asked Christ, how many times should I forgive my brother? And he said 70 times 7. I actually sat down when I was a kid and was like, what does that calculate to, right? And and
400.
that was 490, right?
Is it
And that's
7 is
490 or
one way,
400?
400.
490.
and that's
407. Don't even ask
And
me,
90,
Mas.
Shiko.
Let me just
49
mute
7
plus a
times
myself.
zero.
Goodbye.
For 90. For 90.
7 is 49, right?
49 plus a zero. Yes. Got this, Shiko. We're so glad you're in school. Praise the Lord.
There you go. And
Hallelujah.
remember,
That's the
that
education you
was
paid for, Sekou.
a day. Yes.
Well, you need to ask for your money back.
Touche. That was a day. That wasn't a lifetime. That was a day. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? So this person can kick me in the back 490 times a day, and you expect me to forgive them.
Wait, is it
That would
actually a
be,
day?
if I recall correctly, it was a day.
I was really hoping it was in life because I'll forget like at 300 and start counting at
There
one
you
again.
go.
But then if it's one, if it's a
You said
day,
in life.
yeah, because I've cut some people off because I'm like, you're at 491.
When it hits midnight, it resets. Sorry.
Nah, bruh.
It's like it's a journey, and it's a choice. It's very intentional. It is hard. Forgiveness is hard. Um, those people who present it and brush it off as, yeah, just forgive them, just let it go. You know, they don't know what it feels like to be in your shoes. And they say, you know, if you really want to feel something, step into somebody else's shoes. And more recently, I'm like, well, they may not be your size, they may not be your style, they may not be comfortable. And so it starts with you making that choice and looking internally and saying, selfishly maybe, how is this going to benefit me? Because down the line, I need to take care of my mental health. I need to take care of um, my physical health, because those kinds of things actually wear on you physically as much as mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and so forth. My advice would be, start with yourself, look inward, and then as you look outward, remember that the other person is just as human as you are, and their humanity, I was going to use the term relativity in terms of the way they see things, is going to be different. And so that journey could be very smooth, it could be very quick and fluid, or it could be rocky. It could actually cause the space or that chasm to be bigger, and thereby making reconciliation almost impossible. But who's going to be the bigger person, as they say?
Not
Again, it also
me.
depends on, it depends on the severity of the fault, right? I mean, you read and you hear of these stories of people who say they've forgiven somebody who has murdered very brutally somebody very close to them. There's instances where somebody stupidly drank and ran over and crashed their car and killed a whole family innocently driving home. And many times you'll get people who will say, yeah, get over it and just forgive. That's not for somebody else to decide. It's for you to look inward and say, where am I? What is this doing to me? What is it doing for me by hanging on to it? And if I make the choice to let go of it, I may need some help or direction in doing that, but it comes from my choice. It's my intentionality. And so when the triggers come, don't fault me, don't judge me, because you don't know what I'm dealing with and how I'm dealing with it, how far along the journey I am. And it comes down to repeating myself that choice and the intentionality.
That was deep, but I'm still not going to be the bigger person. Just FYI. Anyone listening, do as he says, not as I do.
Okay. Gadoni, you don't have to be the bigger person. What you can do is follow Michelle Obama's example. When they go low, just go high. You don't have to be
No, no,
bigger. You
no.
can just go higher.
When they go low, I'm taking it to hell.
I'm going real low, she says.
We
I'm
going
going
down, down,
down.
baby.
Wow.
Facts. Yeah, we're going all the way down.
Too funny, too funny.
We really appreciate
Wow.
you sharing a little bit of your journey and your story, and hopefully it'll be helpful to our audience as well.
I hope so. I was gonna say it continues. It's not like I've been through it. My parents passed away, and there's still triggers that come, and I'm like, he's not here, but let's deal with
Yeah,
this. So it's a journey. It's a continual checking in with yourself and making that
Yeah.
choice.
for
Yes.
sure. For sure. Gadoni, even though you will not forgive, can you tell us where they can find us so they won't forget?
For you guys who are like me, and also for the guys who are like Sekou, if you're forgiving, find us at OK Kiasi on all social media platforms. That's OKAYKIASI everywhere. If you're not forgiving, write me an email at okkiasi@gmail.com. Let's bitch on these people, because who do you think they are? Why? Let's be mad together. I'll be mad with you. Write me an email.
Gadoni said, regardless, she wants to be reached out to.
Listen,
Anyway.
maybe there's someone who needs
Can
support
can
in their like anger. I'm here for you.
and can I say that that's okay to get into that bitch space where you need to
Yeah.
unload?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That may be part of the journey in releasing. I'm not saying that you're going to be the courteous kind, whatever it is. In forgiving, there are those moments where releasing is about pouring it out, and that's okay, with the intent that I'm moving beyond the pouring out and
Mm-hmm.
getting beyond that.
Yes. So
Yeah.
pour out into our email, okkiasi@gmail.com.
Oh my goodness. This is our family. As usual,
Gang.
I am Shiko.
I'm Nyam.
And I'm Gadani.
This has been OK Kiasi. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.